Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We don't have a lot of sports around here of late, but it was a great weekend to sit around, have some chicken wings from Royal Farms, and sort of hang out. I also had some Ben & Jerry's while I was at it over the weekend. Lots of football players, and as usual, the Ravens get high marks everywhere. This guy sat next to me at a Senior Bowl a number of years ago. Gosh, I guess we could go back 7 or 8 years ago. Down in Mobile, Alabama, where I had some great oysters and some good times. He is an NFL draft analyst at NFL.com. Out of the fighting city of Houston, where my Allers used to play. He's also there at the bench at 97.5. And fighting the virus and all of that. We don't know when we're actually going to play football, Lance Zierlein, but I know we had a draft over the weekend, and certainly if you're a Ravens fan around here, we're feeling real good about our football team's future pickers. We're pretty good at picking football players around here, aren't we?
Yeah, I think I think the Ravens have figured out they know what they're looking for. They know what's on their shopping list, and they stay focused. They stay disciplined. And they go get good football players. I mean, that's, no one's going to hit all the time. You have some that are up, some that are down. But I think every year you come out of it, for the most part, thinking the Ravens understand value, understand football character, and understand what they're looking for when it comes to finding a Raven.
Well, I mean, there's part of this in the modern era where Ozzie has sort of set the standard, and, along with our mutual friend Phil Savage, who's now working with the Jets, and all of these tentacles that lead to Joe Douglas picking football players in New York. But by and large, through COVID, no pro days, fly-ins weren't around. The sort of instinct of Kokinis and Ortiz and Eric DeCosta and the way that they do things, it really hasn't wavered. And the way they pick football players and the way these guys that you deem to be 40s or 50s to get picked 70s or 80s every year by them, it really is an amazing thing to watch them work. And to, on a Monday morning, look back at the football players they pick. And Lance, there was a point about 11 o'clock on Friday night, right around the time that Goodell put on the slippers and got the cocoa and started pulling names off. The Ravens had 4 players after 11 o'clock on Friday night, and I said one of those 4 guys is going to be a $75 million contract guy, getting DeCosta the next development pick in 2025 when he leaves, because that's the way they pick these players in the 3rd round.
Right. And when you look at who they picked, I mean, I liked every one of those guys. And I had, and they came, now Metabuike is higher than the 3rd, but there was some teams that had some off-the-field stuff with him, and they thought he would drop to about the 3rd. He has really, frankly, I think he has early second-round type talent and early second-round tape over the second half of the season for Texas A&M. But I expected him to fall to the 3rd or 4th, so here he is. You got strong room in Baltimore. You can take him in, want him to be mature and ready to roll. And I think when you look at what they did with Metabuike in the 3rd, that's a lot of talent for a 3rd-round pick. Malik Harrison, just rock solid in the 3rd round. And a guy who I think will fit in very nicely next to Patrick Queen, who's one of my favorite draft picks in the 1st round. And then Tyree Phillips. I think I'm glad that it makes me feel better that my evaluation was in line with what the Ravens saw. Because I talked to a lot of people who thought he was a 5th rounder or 6th rounder. And what I saw and what my grade is the equivalent of about a 3rd rounder. What I thought was one of the only guys on tape who was able to move Derek Brown around. And that's pretty rare. And he was a tackle at Mississippi State. My guess, I haven't read anything about what the Ravens said. My guess is they're going to look at him at guard because I think that's the smart play. And I think that he is a big, powerful guard in the NFL that's got the ability to move people around. So that was just tremendous to me. You've got a chance to get 3 starters in the 3rd round. And I think anytime you can get a starter in the 3rd round, that's something you're happy with. 3rd rounders, you want to be eventual starters, really good backups. And I think that's the case with all 3 players. I think all 3 players have a better chance of becoming starters than just good backups.
Lance Zierlein is here, and we enjoyed a weekend on the couch watching football, getting going on Thursday night, and I started to get into the mocks about a week and a half ago. I mean, Lance, I was not convinced they were going to draft football players, on March 25th, right? I thought, yeah, they're going to talk about it, and then they cancel Vegas, and I thought maybe the tone and the way death and the way the country is and the guy that gets up and tap dances every night, I figured maybe they want to shut up and go away and just put this off for a little while or whatever. They didn't, and, as it went down, I think from top to bottom, it was a real chalk race, to use a Kentucky Derby expression this week, right? Like, from Burrow on, I mean, the Dolphins tanked and still got Tua. I mean, yeah, okay, Philadelphia and Green Bay with the quarterbacks, there was a little thing there, but by and large, most people had Queen going to the Ravens or sort of like that, or there was a dream scenario that Murray would be still there and maybe they would take him, and some people had Bond, but we all sort of on these mocks say, well, linebacker's the spot, that's what they will do, but you could have saw the Ravens taking a wide receiver, you could have saw them taking a guard, replace Yonda. There's all sorts of places that you could go from a positional standpoint, but there was a lot of chalk, and Queen was a guy that when it happened, I was like, yeah, that's what I would have done. 28th, and it's kind of hard to pick there. So many people had him going, and everyone on Monday morning says, I loved him. I love the pick. He'll be great there. It's perfect. I've never heard of a 28 that's so universally loved as this guy, right?
Yeah, and I think it is the position. I mean, I don't know that I saw a Ravens mock. I don't think I took part in one that only had 3 mock drafts this year, but all 3 of them had a linebacker to the Ravens, and it just so happened that that's how the board aligned. You talked about guard. You talked about there wasn't a first-round guard in this draft, none. And then wide receiver. Well, a lot of the best wide receivers are gone by there. So if you had linebacker, whether it was Kenneth Murray or specifically Kenneth Murray and Patrick Queen, if you had them fall into that spot, that was an automatic pick. And most of the time, based on the needs in front of the Ravens, you could see where one of those guys would fall. And once that happened, it was easy to plug them in. And I just think it was a perfect alignment of need versus the way a board would fall. And to me, they got the better of the linebackers. I have a higher grade on Patrick Queen than Kenneth Murray. I like Kenneth Murray a lot. But Kenneth Murray is a fast guy sideline to sideline, but he doesn't do as well when he's got to step into a hole, take on a blocker, and constrict that gap. When you have Patrick Queen, he's a lot better at it. Patrick Queen's got good range and good speed as well. But Patrick Queen, I think, is more physical with a chance to use his hands better. And I don't know if he's going to be as good as Murray in coverage, but he's got some ability in coverage as well as a 3-down linebacker. So I think the Ravens actually, and I've got an article coming out, it should be on Friday at NFL.com, where I take a look at my 3 favorite picks in every round. And the Ravens got my nod as one of the 3 favorites in round 1 with Patrick Queen.
Well, and then they pick up Harrison. And look, Lance, through the history of this, whether it was Pitt and Dixon, Andrews and Hurst, who's now departed and turned into a second-round pick that they turned into 2 other picks, Harrison and Queen, I'm not sure how far apart, and you guys have spent a lot more time, and they're different, but they're complementary to some degree. I've seen so many times guys that are picked in the 70s or 80s supersede guys taken specifically in the 20s or 30s, because most boards aren't all that far apart once you go blue chip 8, 10, 12 deep. In any draft, there's a big mix-up between where 25 and 75 would be.
Yeah, but I don't think, in this particular instance, I'd be shocked if the Ravens didn't have Queen in the top 14 of their board. And then I just think there's a big difference between Queen and Harrison in terms of what they bring to the table. I like Harrison fine. I don't think he's going to be a big playmaker. Queen has a chance to make plays and I think, help set culture, which is already ingrained there in Baltimore. But I think he's a guy that takes over in the department of playing with a certain Ravens culture in the middle of that defense. And so that's why I think that Patrick Queen could end up being a big part of the Ravens defense. But I do think he is more talented. He's faster, much faster than Harrison, and more athletic. I think he's more diverse in terms of what you can ask him to do versatility-wise. I like Harrison. I just think Harrison, to me, could end up being an average starter. Queen has a chance to be a good starter to very good starter. And I think that's the big difference between the two. They're on the same team, so you're happy that you're going to be happy with both of them if they're starters in the future. And I think that's what you're going to see. Queen right away. I think Harrison is probably a year away.
Lance Zierlein covers all things draft and the National Football League at NFL.com. Also out of the fighting city of Houston, Texas. And you can find him out on Twitter as well. We talked about need in the first round. We talked about linebacker, and everybody had the Ravens taking a linebacker and all that stuff. Then the second round comes, and they take a running back. Now, you'd say, well, Ingram, 30 years old, Gus, and the other guys they have, and sort of a deeper a bench, and they're going to run the ball a lot with Lamar Jackson. But J.K. Dobbins, you talk about looking over the hill and around the corner and where you are and something that falls. I would think that Dobbins was probably in their top 20 or 25, right? And just was sitting there at 55. They took him, and they'll find a place for him. And certainly in this running game, this is one more weapon, one more toy for Greg Roman in the offense, right?
Yeah, and what he does is he's a complimentary back to, not a complimentary back, but I think he is. So you can do one of two things. The Tennessee Titans drafted Darrington Evans, who's the exact opposite of Derrick Henry. But what the Ravens did was they took a guy who's similar to Mark Ingram, only he's a little bigger. So they went with J.K. Dobbins, who does some similar things to Mark Ingram. And they basically said, we want to make sure we think he's an upgrade over Gus, and we think that frankly, J.K. Dobbins is going to be the RB1 of the future, which could be as soon as this year, with Ingram playing a more complementary role. And you've got a running back who was a very physical, tough runner last year. I was very impressed with the way that he took on that role for Ohio State. He can come out of the backfield. He's not really known as a big-time pass catcher, but he can do it. He can come out of the backfield, leak outs and things like that. He can handle that for you. And I think Dobbins is a player who gives you a chance to really force the defense to respect the dive. When you get into some of the zone read stuff, everyone's going to be terrified of Lamar Jackson, but what you want is you want them that if they're just a little passive in terms of the read, and they're trying to read the mesh point, and they're sitting back on their heels a little bit looking for where Lamar's going to go, you want a guy who is going to just smash up in there and make you regret that you were passive or on your heels. And I think Dobbins, while I don't know that he's a cannonball necessarily, he will hit it between the tackles, and he'll hit it pretty hard. He can finish behind his pads, and he's a big back. So I think Dobbins, in that particular spot, I think he's a uniquely positive fit for the Ravens because they're not asking him to be, I don't think the Ravens are going to ask him to be, all right, we want you to run for 1,300 and lead the league in rushing, and we're going to set our offense up around you. That's not it. They're just asking him to be physical, and I think he's the kind of back who can step in and immediately take pressure off of Lamar Jackson because everyone's going to be the game plans are all going to be set up for Lamar Jackson. Here's the concern. I talked to somebody with the Titans at the Senior Bowl, and I said, man, congrats. Dean Pease did a hell of a job against Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. He said, actually, he got it from the Bills. The Bills is where he got the game plan from watching tape of the Bills and visiting with them. And so now you have two teams, the Bills and the Titans, who have put that on tape. They put on tape the way you're supposed to defend Lamar Jackson, which is own the center of the field, against the pass and against the run, make all of his runs spill wide, make his throws outside the hash. The scout was telling me exactly what they had talked about defensively and what the game plan was going to be. And so anytime you go into an off season, and we saw this with Colin Kaepernick in San Francisco when Jim Harbaugh had that inverted diamond offense he was running. Well, the very next year, in the offseason.
You mean the one where they had 4 plays at the 1-yard line to take away my book and all the fun that we had and didn't hand the ball to Franco? You mean that time
yeah.
when the lights went out and all? Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, you remember that season. That's right. You remember that season. Well,
I'm wearing purple today. Yes, it's all true.
So it's funny because Green Bay, who got annihilated by that offense, they went to Texas A&M and studied because Texas A&M was running it offensively, and they said, where are the weaknesses? And so A&M schooled them up and told them this is where. And what's going to happen is Lamar Jackson and Roman are going to see a brand new set of defenses that are specifically tied to trying to do exactly what Tennessee did and exactly what the Bills did. So the way you counter that is get ahead of it, and you say, well, y'all can have whatever counter you want, but we're going to come downhill at you with Ingram and with, I know you're all geared to stop Lamar Jackson, but what's going to happen when Dobbins and Ingram get running downhill on you? I mean, then what are you going to do? What are you going to do when you got to respect that? And we're going with our 2 and 3 tight end sets, and we're hitting you with the play action.
Well, and Hollywood's the fastest guy on the field, too. You also have that.
And I think you have Hollywood that you always have to worry about with your safeties, have to always know where he is. So I think that's the thing. When you have that kind of speed on the field, safeties have to recognize it. They have to back up a few steps. The running game can get that much easier if you got the right pieces in place. Well, and I think Dobbins is one of those pieces.
The thing I'll share with you that I've shared, openly, and I don't know that so many people have talked about it, the night that the Ravens went out to the Coliseum and beat the snot out of the Rams in the mustard uniforms, and that little aisleway at USC, that big tunnel, where the locker rooms were closed, and Eric Weddle came out. And Eric knew some of the Baltimore guys, me, Jamison Hensley, Jeff Zrebeck, a couple of us were there out in L.A., and he pulled us aside. He said, I practiced against that last year, and, he said, but being in the secondary, you can't see the ball. And you have no idea who has the ball or where the ball is. And this is a guy playing 15 years in the league. You know what I mean? That it's like a hidden ball trick. So to your point, to put three of those guys in the backfield and say, I don't know who's got the ball, and you're going to have Big Nick Boyle cracking down on you, and Andrews getting loose, and Lamar comes out of it with the ball, or Ingram comes out with the ball and throws it on you. That's really how they won by 40 points every week for 2 months last year.
Right. And teams are not going to let you just. Here's what teams don't do. They don't sit there and say, well, I guess we're just going to have to deal with it and see what happens. No, I mean they're going to go find every cut up and every play, especially now where they're at home. They're going to find every cut up and every play of what caused Lamar Jackson his biggest problems and concerns, and then that's what they're going to scheme around. And they're going to find what he did best and what do we do to take this away. It's always a game of chess. I mean, it's boxing really. It's punching, it's counter punching, it's changing your style, you're switching your stance from orthodox to southpaw, whatever the case may be. But you have to keep teams on their heels, and I think that's where, we're going to find out. This obviously isn't draft related, but we're going to find out because Lamar Jackson and Greg Roman and the Baltimore Ravens are going to see some new things this year, provided we play football. They're going to see some new things that they didn't see last year, and how they handle that and how they counterpunch is going to determine the greatness of Lamar Jackson, and it's going to determine the greatness of the Ravens.
Lance
whether or
Zierlein,
not they can build on it.
Joining us here from NFL.com. You can find him pre-mocks, post-grades, and, of course, all season long at NFL.com. He's got a special thing coming out on Friday as well with the best picks of each round. The one thing that sort of alarmed all of us on the clock at 60 with that second pick was Mims goes to the Jets, and Joe Douglas is high-fiving his kids and all that stuff, hugging his wife and whatnot. I'm seeing the pictures on Facebook an hour later. Then the Ravens deal out and get the extra pick and move back into second night. The Mims thing. Any thoughts about it? He'll be the guy for Ravens fans to say, all right, we'll watch Duvernay, but Mims was a thought that could have been a Raven, not going to be a Raven. We're going to watch him do it up there with the Jets.
Yeah, so let's see how this one plays out. I mean, I think Mims is more talented than Duvernay. I think Duvernay is very limited. He's a real tight-hip guy. What Duvernay is he's fast in a straight line. He's a former track man. Doesn't always play as fast as his time speed because he, feels like a little bit of a step counter when he's out there running his routes. He's a little stiff getting in and out of routes. But what he's very good at is you throw him a little wide receiver hitch, you put the ball in his hands, and he runs like he hates you. I mean, he is a physical runner. And I think putting him in position to succeed is going to be critical. Get the ball in his hands, Don't ask him to. You can have him stretch the field vertically from time to time, but really where he's going to be at his best is underneath in the catch and run stuff, unless he's able to become a much better route runner, which, he's going to always have some limitations because he's a little tight-hipped. You look at Denzel Mims, and he's big, long. He can leap in 40-inch vertical. He's very fast on tape. But Devin Duvernay is tremendously competitive at every spot on the field. The thing that bothered me with Denzel Mims is I didn't think he competed very hard when Jeff Gladney from TCU was checking him for most of that game. My concern, and I know it was a concern of some teams in the league, is if you have a guy that's that big, that fast, that explosive as a leaper, those kind of ball skills, how is he not in the first round? Well, the reason he's not in the first round is because he doesn't always fight through the top of fight through route traffic and fight through physical coverage, get off the press effectively. So I'm not 100% sure. I like the potential of Denzel Mims, but I think he's got something to prove to all of the evaluators in the league that they missed on him, because I'm not entirely sure that he's going to love the physicality of the NFL game. He's going to have to prove that he can fight back a little bit more and be more aggressive.
Any thoughts on the Eagles and the Packers and all the hubbub and any player that sort of shocked you or place it when? The overall perspective of the draft is I think most teams have gotten pretty good at this, right? Like there aren't a whole lot of complete, like, where the hell did that guy come from? Even when the Eagles sort of, draft another quarterback like they always do, right?
Yeah, I probably do that more than most just because I write up 500 players a year, so I have a knowledge of all these guys, almost all who are being drafted, and I may do it on some picks where everyone else wouldn't care, where some people hate a pick and I actually like it. So let me just talk about the two very specific selections you're talking about. Jordan Love, I have a second-round grade on Jordan Love. However, with that said, who cares? Jordan Love may end up being a good player. I only care about what the team who drafts him, what their grade is on him. And from a philosophical standpoint, I like this idea. It's the same reason I like the Aaron Rodgers idea. I like the idea because I liked it conceptually because it gives you a chance to replace your quarterback before your quarterback has lost it completely. With that said, you have shorter deals nowadays. And so after 2 years, you pretty much have to move on from Aaron Rodgers. You really, at least 2 years. It might be 1 year. You have to move on from Aaron Rodgers because you got to figure out what you got in that quarterback before you have to start paying him big money. So I was okay from it philosophically if you're ready to get away from Aaron Rodgers. Number two, I didn't have a problem with Philadelphia Hurts. Now, in the second round is a little rich for me, but I understood what they're doing. This is a quarterback who's oft injured in Carson Wentz. It goes back to his high school days, goes back, and I think they wanted to get their pick of the litter in terms of a good backup. They also envision, my guess is, he's not Taysom Hill, despite what people will say, but what he is more Tim Tebow, where you give him a direct snap and he is a bowling ball. He is extremely powerful in his lower body, and he's hard to stop. So I could envision him doing some short yardage stuff, and then from there you got a counter of being able to throw out of short yardage when teams start to crowd the line of scrimmage on you too much. But I think more than anything, they view a guy who is a winner, somebody who will be good in the locker room, somebody who will be good in the meeting room. And I think Philadelphia envisions, Tebow couldn't throw the ball like Jalen Hurts can. Jalen Hurts can throw it. So I think they envision Hurts becoming a really good backup who they will feel better about if they've got to play with him on Sundays if something happens to Carson Wentz. So they went around earlier than you usually do that. You usually do that in the third. They went in the second. And so maybe that tells you how important they feel like his ability to run the football, too, is, because they want to utilize that with Doug Peterson's offense.
Last thing for you on the last day picks for the Ravens, because you do go 500 deep, and Geno Stone won 219 deep. Bredesen, Broderick Washington, Prochet, Stone, all lauded at the moment they happened and the needs that the Ravens have, and certainly on the D-line, and trying to replace Yonda through the draft as well. And it's hard to do that with a Hall of Famer. But some thoughts on the rest, the field, as we would say, which is hard to get excited about a seventh-round draft pick. We don't do that, but a lot of people are excited about Geno Stone.
Yeah, Geno Stone is a smart player who was very, very productive last year. Once again, he's a guy with some limitations. I think the difference between Stone and Jalen Hawkins, who was drafted earlier, is that there's probably a belief that Hawkins has a chance to be a better special teams addition. And I would say Hawkins is more of a guy who you have as a career backup who you really count on special teams. And I think he's got a better chance than Geno Stone to do that. James Prochet has some of the best highlight reel catches of anybody, and my guess is he would have gone in the fourth, but he's got a kidney issue, and a lot of teams pulled him completely off the board. I was not expecting him to get drafted. The fact that he went sixth, I love for the kid because he is super competitive. He is great when the ball is in the air, and he's got just some unbelievable catches. But we'll have to see how the health holds up there with the Ravens. Love Broderick Washington. He is a powerful, barrel-chested tackle. I didn't think he was getting the recognition that he deserved in the draft process. I liked him a lot better than most, and I think we saw where the Ravens drafted him. You can tell that they liked him as well. That was in the fifth round. That was where I thought his grade was. Fifth rounds typically, you call him in Baltimore. They would call him a 5.9 grade, a 5.9, which is a backup, a decent backup grade. My guess is they had a 5.9 on him. They may have had a 6.1, which would be good backup with a chance of becoming an eventual starter. So I like that selection there. And then Ben Bredeson, he's going to be big, wide, physically he looks the part. Just the run blocking was a little too inconsistent for me. So I think they're going to have to tighten up some technique there with him. I think he could become a functional starter on that offensive line as a fourth rounder, but I don't ever think he'll be a plus starter. I think just functional starter is probably his ceiling, but that's okay. I mean, that's what you're trying to find: depth, functional starters, and you're just trying to incrementally make your roster better each year.
Lance, always a pleasure to check in with you. I'm sorry we haven't been in the same place at the same time, but I am out here watching, following, mocking your mocks, and then trying to find you afterward here to at least bring it all home. It was a good weekend, right? I mean, and the broadcast and Goodell sipping cocoa and doing all that. I can live with less booze and less Bud Light, but I mean, that's just on me. I was hoping to be in Vegas and watch Goodell go into the fountain at the Bellagio maybe next year, but the NFL pulled this off, and I find it fascinating. We could talk for half an hour like this about football. We have this mutual love of football, but both of us are looking at this and saying if there's going to be a season, right? So at least there's this part of it that felt normal. Now there's the rest of it, which I don't think is normal for anybody, right?
No, it's not. But I like the stripped down version of the draft. I think it was perfectly imperfect the way that our society is right now and what we're going through. And I just thought it was a 55 million people watched it. Almost 40% increase from last year. I mean, this was something I think a lot of us needed. And just like you said earlier, I'm glad that it ended up going off. And I thought even with minor hitches and glitches here and there, I thought it was really fun to watch. And I kind of liked the stripped down version of it. It was kind of a throwback.
Crazy things, man, like dogs and cats. DaCosta taking an LSU linebacker, man. We don't draft LSU guys around here. We're Bama around here. So
Bama guys,
that was certainly a stretch.
In the SEC.
Never drafted LSU and never drafted a Clemson before this year. So now, we'll have to see how it goes down there with Dabo. So, hey, really appreciate your time, Lance. Be well, all right?
Okay, sounds good.
All right, man. Get some good food for me in Mobile next year if I'm not there. I hope you're there. Had a good time in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. Lance Zierlein joining us here from NFL.com. Also, you can find him on Twitter, Lance Zierlein. That's Zierlein. And the bench at 97.5 in Houston, Texas. Beautiful bar he has up there on Twitter as well. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, everywhere. Got my Ravens magma lamp from Sporticulture, and really do appreciate Court. Court hit me last week, said, I'm going to send you tomatoes and sage and flowers and stuff and thyme and basil and cucumbers and stuff to plant. And I'm also going to send one of the Sporticulture fantastic purple plants. My cat Nala has been trying to gnaw at it and eat it. My wife's been trying to keep it alive, and it gets to look at an empty Camden Yards. Thank you, Court. Appreciate you at Sporticulture. We are WNST.net, and I don't know how much more football we're going to be doing. We do Baltimore sports, but we're keeping calm, staying local, and certainly staying Baltimore positive.